It's on Joy News Prime. Immigration Service lists numerous instances where non-Ghanaians have been refused entry into the country in compliance with Ghana's COVID-19 travel restrictions in a bid to limit new infections. The airline that was turned away, the Ghana Health Service, meanwhile, says the number of COVID-19 cases still stands at 7. Would be speaking with a Ghanaian who saw firsthand how an airline flying into Ghana from the US was refused to allow non-Ghanaians to board the flight. He will be speaking to us later on in the bulletin from his home, where he's self-quarantined. Now, but how are Ghana's COVID-19 patients faring so far?
Well, they are generally doing well. They are being kept there more for the purposes of isolation to minimize contact with other people.
In Parliament, the imposition of restrictions bill, which will give backing to the president's directive to control the spread of coronavirus, has been laid. The Speaker has also directed a rearrangement of seats to meet social distancing requirements.
Promulgation of this chamber before we see tomorrow.
But there's also the curious case of sanitizer dispensers deployed in the house being drained too quickly, raising suspicion some people could be stealing them.
Speaker, we are procuring the sanitizers and placing them at advantage positions. What we are beginning to notice is that a few individuals are draining the sanitizers and taking them elsewhere.
Elsewhere, some church leaders have been arrested for assembling large congregations in defiance of a presidential directive. In business.
And pharmaceutical companies worry about their stocks running out as coronavirus pandemic limits importation of essential raw materials from India and the UK.
Talking about raw materials, beyond 3 months, we need to get some of these materials, raw materials, in the system for local production.
I'm Israel Lyon. Joy News Prime comes to you live from the Joy News studio Kokomlemle here in Accra with digital address GA0992539, where we're celebrating 25 years of responsible journalism in fulfillment of our role as the fourth estate of the realm. Stay tuned in. We start with the sad news of the death of 3 Ghanaians in Europe from the novel coronavirus. Foreign Minister Shirley Ayokoboche told journalists outside Parliament House 2 of the deaths were in Italy and another in Denmark. She however says the situation is not critical enough to require the evacuation of Ghanaians in hard-hit countries, but urge nationals to comply with social distancing regulations in their host countries.
Things that we can only do because we have to protect ourselves. If there is an emergency situation, we will definitely move in, take all the precautions necessary and move in to assist our nationals. But for now, there's no emergency situation. I've heard that 2 Ghanaians in Italy have lost their life and 1, I believe, in Copenhagen, in Denmark. So far, from the virus, yes. The two Ghanaians plus 1, so it's 3. There's 3 Ghanaians so far, and we're praying that they keep to the advice that has been given by all these countries and make sure that they are safe. Don't go out if you don't have to, unless it's absolutely necessary. Stay home. They've allowed people to work from home in most cases and all of that. So schools are, all the epicenters, the schools are on break so that they can deal with the numbers and bring them down considerably. And in most of the countries, I spoke to one of my counterparts in a very high incidence country, and she said she's expecting that their numbers will rise in the next 2 weeks. And this is, I think, about the second now in terms of the high numbers. I don't want to mention the country, but they're expecting even more cases. And the way it looks, once it peaks and it starts to come down, then movement starts. And those who are infected, who don't even know that they've been infected, move, and then it's spreading elsewhere. So it's like a wave. It's moved from Asia, now it's in Europe. You don't know where it's going to go next. So it's important that we do what we've been able to do and to ensure that our people are safe.
Yeah, talking about advice, are you in charge with those offering consular services out there and advising them not to travel back home in the moment?
We have actually advised even our officers who have finished their tour of duty and are supposed to come back home. We've asked them to stay on. We've given them a month. If after the month this thing is still raging, we will give them more time. So that's what we are doing. We've advised Ghanaians generally everywhere to stay put, unless it's absolutely necessary. But for our staff who need to come home, we've asked them to stay. Nobody from our ministry is going, because conferences have been cancelled. Workshops, conferences, all these things have been cancelled. And so I think that everybody, every country is ensuring that they take precautions. I mean, Nigeria, Togo.
Right, let's go over now to Parliament House and speak with our parliamentary correspondent, Joseph Opoku Gakpo, where we're learning that the Imposition of Restrictions Bill 2020 has been laid. Hello, Joseph. At what stage do we have this bill?
So, Israel, the bill has been referred to the Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs. Now, that committee is supposed to sit either later this evening or first thing tomorrow morning. Actually, we gather first thing tomorrow morning and deliberate on it and come to a determination as to whether this is a document that should be looked at by the House under a certificate of urgency. And then in the afternoon tomorrow, they are expected to report back to the House. And if the green light is given that it can be looked at under a certificate of urgency, then the committee can then go back and look at the specifics of what the requirements are and report to the House as soon as possible. And all the restrictions, including a 14-day period of gazetting and all other issues that should have been dealt with if it was going through the normal process, can then be waived. So for now, it's seized with the Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs, and they are supposed to report back to the House tomorrow afternoon on whether it can be considered under a certificate of urgency.
Now, Joseph, what's contained in this bill?
Let me go through those specifics for you in a while. This is a very brief document, just about 4 pages. And from the explanation that we're getting and what the details contained in it are, it's actually an act to provide for the imposition of restrictions in accordance with the Constitution, and that this is something that would allow for the president to impose various restrictions after issuing an executive instrument, and that executive instrument will spell out the specific restrictions to be imposed, the duration of the restriction, the persons to whom the restriction applies, the geographic areas to which the restriction applies, and also the applicable offenses and penalties and any other related matters. But let me go specifically to the circumstances under which any such restrictions may be imposed. That's the interesting bit of this document. First of all, the restrictions could be imposed in when it comes to issues of the interests of defense, public safety, public health, or the running of essential services like electricity, water, transport, and all. As well, the restrictions could actually be imposed when it comes to movement or residence within Ghana, and also movement or entry into Ghana or movement within Ghana broadly. And then the final interesting bit, that the restrictions could be imposed as a means of safeguarding the people of Ghana against the teaching or propagation of a doctrine which exhibits or encourages disrespect for the nationhood of Ghana, the symbols and emblems, or incites hatred against other community members of Ghana. So this is not just something that will allow for restrictions when it comes to public health and public safety and all, but also it could allow for restrictions to avoid a situation where other persons will teach Ghanaians to hate the country or disrespect the nation's symbols and emblems.
Now, Joseph, what has been the posturing of the MPs in the House, especially the minority, to passage of this bill?
Well, the minority MPs are already raising red flags over this particular document that has been laid. They think that it's out of place. They think it gives too much sweeping powers to the president in order to impose restrictions and do things that are out of place. In fact, Muntaka Mubarak, who is the minority chief whip, makes the point that such a document, when passed, would not be in the interest of the country because it would create a situation where the president would have more powers than even when he imposes a state of emergency. And he's worried that when it's approved, it could be abused by any leader. In fact, he thinks it's an unnecessary document, particularly because it doesn't mention anything having to do with the coronavirus, and that if the president was really interested in dealing with that, he could have used the Public Order Act. When I put a specific question to him as to whether his side of the House will actually support its approval, he says those determinations will be made in the course of the day tomorrow when they begin deliberations on it.
All right, but Joseph, is the House in session at the moment, and is it that they're in session to consider part of this?
So the House is currently sitting, but they will not be able to deal with this bill until they've gotten a report back from the Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs. And that committee is actually sitting first thing tomorrow. So the House is currently in session. The House is dealing with amendments to the draft corporate insolvency bill, which is currently before the House, after which they are expected to adjourn sitting and return tomorrow morning, and by which they are hoping that the Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs would have returned with a report on whether or not to consider this particular bill under a certificate of urgency.
Thank you very much. That was parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku Gakpo bringing us that update from Parliament House. And we're staying with Parliament and going back to our earlier story on the Speaker directing the fumigation of Parliament House as part of efforts to prevent spread of the coronavirus. He has also directed rearrangements of seats in the chamber so MPs keep enough distance from one another in line with World Health Organization guidelines.
We should see progress in that regard. You know, in other organizations, honorable members order, this is very important. Some have stopped work. Some have made very serious arrangements and rearrangements. And we should continue to consider these for Parliament. We can't. Even the matter of the state of emergency, Parliament has to act on it. So it means that no matter the emergency that arises, Parliament must be around to take steps under the Constitution which are demanded to direct this nation and approve of relevant orders. Meanwhile, I notice that the WHO has indicated clearly the distance required between human beings, people, when they sit. When we visited the Flash House, we saw clearly that they were adhering and we had to sit far from each other. Our arrangements are not in accordance with that World Health Order. I'm directing that the clerk and the leadership of the House must seriously work on this, such that at least there should be an interval of one space between us as we are seated now, so that now order, there shall be fumigation of this chamber before we sit tomorrow. And also all other arrangements, including the possible use of upstairs, the gallery, and other spaces that the leaders can create within the chamber, should also be considered, because these are global directives which we must also think of and adhere to.
We'll shortly be bringing you the very latest on the number of COVID-19 cases registered or confirmed in Ghana. Well, the good news is that it hasn't changed from yesterday. It is still at 7. But going back to Parliament, there are concerns about the rate at which sanitizer dispensers deployed in the House are being drained. The sanitizer stands were mounted across the House last week as part of measures to protect MPs and staff from COVID-19. Minister for Parliamentary Affairs Osei Mensah-Bonsu has suspicions that dispensers wouldn't be emptying in just about an hour if they were being used to sanitize the hands of MPs and the parliamentary staff. He wants a review of CCTV cameras for possible clues as to why the dispensers are being drained so quickly.
Mr. Speaker, we've had some discussions, and let me state this from the very outset, that we are beginning to witness some unfortunate events in this House. Mr. Speaker, we are procuring the sanitizers and placing them at advantage positions. What we are beginning to notice is that a few individuals are draining the sanitizers and taking them elsewhere, which is very serious. Mr. Speaker, we need to activate the CCTVs, and anybody who is caught in this is not only going to be named and shamed, but appropriate sanctions will be applied on that person. It cannot be that sanitizers are placed at advantage positions and then overnight will come and everything is gone. It cannot happen. The Speaker, what I mean by overnight doesn't mean necessarily that it happened in the course of the night. Even whilst you sit, members are sitting, and then you step out, you go to where you saw a sanitizer that was almost full, and within 1 hour, everything is gone. It cannot be.
Now, the Ghana Immigration Service says it has refused entry to several passengers who could have posed a risk to the country from the novel coronavirus pandemic. The refusals, in line with the travel advisory issued last Sunday, affect passengers arriving from countries with 200 or more cases of COVID-19. Addressing a news conference to update the public about measures to contain the spread of the pandemic, Deputy Comptroller General Lord Fourier Frifa listed several instances where international passengers were turned away. In one instance, it says a whole flight was turned away.
So far, as of yesterday, on the 16th March, we refused 2 Italians entry who were traveling in on Air France. In fact, we did not allow them to disembark because we normally have the travel advice from the airlines. We screen it and see who is on board before they come. So the 2 Italians were noted on the Air France flight, and the team went in, the joint team of the Ghana Immigration Service and the Port Health authorities went on board and explained the situation to them, and they were refused and they were not allowed to them back. They returned with the flight. Yesterday, 17th of March, 24 Chinese were refused entry, and also 1 German, also under the same circumstances, with a kick-in of the travel ban at 1 p.m. This morning, there is an incident in Abidjan. The airport is closed due to an incident on the tarmac. So flights were being diverted to Ghana. In consultation with the civil aviation, all those flights were refused landing and sent back. 1 Ethiopian airline flights that landed without permission. The passengers were not allowed to disembark. They were refueled and they continued on their journey. The flight statistics that we have indicate that there has been a drastic drop in passenger inflow, especially on the major airlines. So for yesterday, for instance, British Airways, which would normally bring in about 350 passengers, brought in 140. KLM would normally bring in about 450 daily, brought in 128. Air Portugal, which would normally bring in about 150, brought in 12. Kenya Airways Flight would normally bring in about 120, brought in 66.
The Ghana Health Service, meanwhile, says Ghana's number of confirmed COVID-19 cases stands at 7.
As of this evening, the 18th of March, 2020, the case count remains 7. All 7 cases are being managed in isolation and all are in stable condition. We are conducting the contact tracing. The contacts have risen to 381. None of the contacts yet have been confirmed as suspected case, and all of them are being followed up and are doing well. Team, this is the contacts for the first 6 cases that were detected. The single case that was seen yesterday, adding up to 7. The contact tracers have gone out. They are yet to come back to enable us to receive their report. So by close of today, I believe the total number of contacts that are being followed would increase.
Now, very little has been said about the number of patients or the patients who are in isolation at the various holding centers. Now, Kojo Yangsing has been speaking with or has been checking up on one of the isolation centers we have. This is at the Greater Accra Region Hospital. Let's hear Dr. Shrofanya.
Each of the patients has his own area of to stay. It's self-containing, and you have your bed, you have the necessary gadgets in the room to monitor you, you have a hand sanitizer, you have your own washroom, your bath, and then your sink where you can wash your hand. Unfortunately, we have the capacity is such that we can take only maximum of 4 persons at a time. So that is one of the drawbacks of this center. It is well designed, and the environment is perfect. The isolation is so good from the main part of the hospital, but the capacity is small. That is 4.
How many patients do you have there at the moment?
Currently, to the best of my knowledge, about 2 patients are there currently.
Okay.
Yes.
What can you tell us about those patients?
Well, they are generally doing well. They are being kept there more for the purposes of isolation to minimize contact with other people. That is the main reason, not that they are particularly sick. No. We are not even giving them any major treatments, but basically for the purpose of isolation, so that they don't contact more people and create more problems.
Right, so very little has been said about how well these people are doing. So now you know that they are doing quite well. And some of what we're hearing or what we're getting from the Ghana Health Service also has to do with some good news. You can say that there apparently, so far, there's not been a case of local transmission, and that's available on the website of the Ghana Health Service. So here you have it. It says as of March 17, a total of 143 suspected cases have been tested for COVID-19 by the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research and the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research. And it goes on to talk about the latest updates, the latest case, which is that of the 35-year-old male, a Ghanaian citizen who returned to Accra from France within the past 14 days. And it says this is another imported case, which brings the total number of confirmed cases to 7. The case is being managed in isolation and is in stable condition. And then this is the interesting part of it. It says, with regard to contact tracing, a total of 350 contacts have been identified and are being followed up. 2 of the contacts who developed symptoms had their samples tested, but they came out to be negative. Now, this figure of 350 has since been updated to 381. But the interesting bit is 2 of the contacts who developed symptoms had their samples tested, but they came out to be negative. Right, we have a lot more on the COVID-19 coming your way. But now we're taking a break to bring you this. Sandra Feng will be joining me in a bit. Stay tuned. It's for business, and Sandra Fenu is here. Hello, Sandra.
I'm dreading the day we will wake up and there's no news about COVID-19 anymore.
You're dreading? Yeah, we're hoping that we're going to get rid of COVID-19 very soon. I'm actually looking forward to the day we'll just get rid of it.
The impact is just too much, and we'll be talking about that in business. And of course, we are celebrating 25 years of joy. My name is Sandra Esinamapeno, and I'm here for business. The Chamber of Pharmacy Ghana says government is raising a 500 million cedi bond to settle a backlog of debt. The bond is expected to be issued on Friday. Odilia Ntiamwa has been following the developments in the pharmaceutical sector and reports companies have 3 months supply, after which it will be difficult to supply drugs across the country. Here's the CEO of the Chamber of Pharmacy Ghana, Anthony Mecca.
Currently, the pharmaceutical sector is ready, and we are confident of supplying any form of medicine for treatment when you get to the treatment stage. That's not a problem at all. It's not a problem. We don't need to import those finished products. What we have will be able to take care of the system for now. Yeah. But the government is also going to procure things like ventilators to other hospitals when we get to that stage. Now we are talking about raw materials. Beyond 3 months, we need to get some of these materials, raw materials, in the system for local production. Currently, I must say that we have contract with the service providers. And the service providers also have contract with NHI. What we want is for the service providers to pay for the supplies. So Ministry of Finance is going to raise bond that is going to pay for the outstanding NHI claims. Then they will also make sure that they pay on a monthly basis to the tune of almost 70 million Ghana cedi to the service providers every month.
In other news tonight, the Bank of Ghana has dropped the rate at which it lends to commercial banks by a significant and record margin. It came down by 150 basis points to 14.5%. The move is to lessen the impact of the coronavirus on the economy. There's more in the following report.
The Monetary Policy Committee, in a statement issued a while ago, noted that a cut was because adjusting the rate would not pose any significant challenge to the outlook of inflation and possibly economic growth. The Bank of Ghana also projected that GDP growth could decline by some 5% in a baseline scenario, or in worst-case scenario, half by about 2.5%. As part of efforts to improve liquidity in the banking space, the Bank of Ghana has rolled out a series of measures. These include reducing the primary reserve requirement for banks from 10% to 8%. This is expected to improve liquidity for banks so that they can lend to critical sectors of the economy, especially to small-sized enterprises. Also, the 3% capital conservation buffer, CCB, for banks has been slashed to 1.5%. This action is to enable banks to provide the needed financial support to the economy. This effectively reduces the capital adequacy requirement from 13% to 11.5%. The capital conservation buffer for banks of 3% is also being reduced to 1.5%. This is to enable banks to provide the needed financial support to the economy. This effectively reduces the capital adequacy requirement from 13% to 11.5%. Provisioning for loans in the other loans especially mentioned OLEM category is reduced from 10% to 5% for all banks and specialized deposit-taking institutions, SDIs. As a policy response to loans that may experience difficulty in repayment due to the slowdown in economic activity. Also, provisioning norms for loans in all other categories are maintained. This should provide capital relief to banks and SDIs in these uncertain times. Loan repayments that are due for microfinance institutions for up to 30 days shall be considered as current as in the case for all SDIs. The Bank of Ghana has also agreed with banks and mobile network operators on measures to facilitate more efficient payments and promote digital forms of payment for the next 3 months. This also includes waiving charges on some cash transactions by up to 100 Ghana cedis. All mobile phone subscribers are now permitted to use their already existing mobile phone registration details to be on board for minimum KYC accounts. It has also reviewed the daily limit on transactions depending on the amounts that you have. According to the Bank of Ghana, it is closely monitoring development as regards the impact of the coronavirus on the domestic economy and will not hesitate to convene an emergency meeting to deliberate on other measures if required.
And my colleague, George Rafe, joins me in the studio for more on this. And George, this is certainly some good news for the financial sector, especially after a long while we've had a rate at 16%. Now it's coming down to 14.5. How significant is this, and how will it help mitigate the impact of the virus on the financial sector?
Well, you want to look at the policy rate is the rate at which the Bank of Ghana lends to commercial bank. It is also a benchmark for lending in this country. So it gives you an indication what will be the cost of credit. If the Bank of Ghana believes that going forward there wouldn't be any threat to the economy and they've lowered it, it means that that would impact on the cost of credit in the country. Now, again, if you go through the same statement, the Bank of Ghana has done two scenarios for us that at worst the economy will grow at 2.5%. That is serious. In a long time, we haven't seen the economy grow by that margin. It means that you need to put things in place that would help stimulate growth. It is believed that when you pump in more cash into the economy to critical sectors, that could stimulate that growth. So if you go through the same statement again, the Bank of Ghana has put in certain requirements that would make more cash available to the commercial
And
banks.
what are some of these
These
measures?
are reserve requirements. These are basically, in layman's terms, you're supposed to keep some amount of money with the Bank of Ghana, a limit on your deposit. What the Bank of Ghana is saying that they're going to make more available to the commercial banks. It means that in return, you are supposed to also lend to businesses and small businesses. So they are, by the several monetary policies or monetary mechanisms, the central bank is trying to make available more cash to the commercial banks, i.e. compared to the reserves and the limits that we're supposed to keep with the Bank of Ghana. And they believe that that would help push some money into the economy at a time that some businesses are not doing well, because imagine a business that has been forced to shut down. You go into the nightclub space and you could look at
And especially
Bloomberg.
when we are coming just from the financial sector crisis and all that.
Well, some businesses have picked up. So some of these measures would try and help putting some money into the system at a lower rate, even trying to review how businesses can pay back their loans. And all these things, the Bank of Ghana believes that it would help stimulate the economy based on their projection that we may at worst end the year with a 2.5% economic growth. That's scary.
That's quite interesting. Let's look at the other issue that has to do with the Momo charges, and then also that it's been reviewed up to 100 Ghana cedis. And so what does that really mean?
What it means is, from the Bank of Ghana is trying to tell us that if you do a transaction on any of the platforms and there's just 100 Ghana cedis, you might not pay. You are not going to pay any
So
charge.
if I'm sending somebody money, I will not pay any charge on the 100 Ghana cedis.
All these things are meant to help pushing some money into the system, because it's believed that at a time when you're also trying to restrict people from moving, you want to push a lot of transactions onto these electronic platforms. So again, if you also go through what the Bank of Ghana has agreed, depending on the amount of money that you have in your wallet, there might not be any restrictions on it. Because don't forget that there's some restrictions on it actually, because if you cannot take more than 2,000 Ghana cedis based on the amount you have in your money. So per the various limits and the various KYC, they have actually waived those restrictions. That would help move money around. And it's believed that that would also help people to do various transactions, even though you can stay at home and not walk into the banking hall and do a lot of things. And all these things, Sandra, as I said, is that it's trying to stimulate economic growth by making available more money to businesses and even you and I, and don't put in any impediments in your way in trying to do transactions on these various electronic platforms.
And hopefully this is going to help the financial sector. I don't know whether there's other interventions that have been put.
Well, it's in these things you do scenarios and projections. And that is why the economists will always want to say that all other things being equal, if you're going to hold all these factors constant, and it believes that it's going to work. So if you look at ending the year at 2.5% economic growth, then you know that you really have to sit up. Now, this is just the monetary side. It means that the Ministry of Finance also needs to come out with some measures tax reliefs. Listen,
some businesses
have shut down for like 2 weeks. Are you going to go back to that business at the end of the month that pay taxes to me?
Right.
So if that stimulation will really occur, there should be some fiscal measures to support what the Bank of Ghana is doing for that growth to come about and that stimulation to come about.
Okay, George Biafe, thanks so much. We'll wait for that announcement from the Minister of Finance as to what can be done to further lessen the burden on businesses. The good news is that the lending rate has come down from 16% to 14.5%, and that's how we end the first part of business. My name is Sandra S. and I'm up, and I'm surely back after 8 p.m. with more business news. Do stay tuned.
Right, it's time for Showbiz, and Noella Karinyali is here. Hello, Noella.
Hi, Israel.
There's been a lot happening today as far as COVID-19. It looks like everything is about COVID-19.
Yeah, of course. And today I visited some pubs, some entertainment centers here in Accra, and most of them, or some of them, have shut down. Some haven't. For instance, I know that the Plus 233 Jazz Bar and Grill, they won't talk to me on record, but they shut down today. Also, Corner won't talk to me on record, but they told me between tomorrow and the day after, they will decide whether or not they're going to shut down.
All right. That's the Republic down.
That's Republic, yeah. Republic, they've shut down also. And if you know Republic, you should know that on a normal day, the place is pretty much crowded. Yeah. And most of their clientele are, foreigners. But the owner tells me that that's not the reason why they shut down.
Well, you're aware of the severity of the virus. It is true that in Ghana we do have a very small incidence rate, but the rate of growth is yet to be determined. I think it's very early for us to know the prevalence rate at the moment and how fast it's going to grow. And part of our due diligence, the fact that Republic is a small bar that contains a lot of people, it's difficult to maintain the distances that are perceived as suitable, to avert contamination or infection. So we just thought it's in the interest of ourselves, the staff, and the interest of our customers. We'd rather close our doors until we, take our time to assess the situation both globally and locally. So statistically, 20% of our clientele are foreigners, out of which the foreigners that do come to our place, both Caucasian or from other like African countries and other parts of the world. Majority of that 20% are residents in Ghana, so they're not really frequent travelers per se. But of course, you do have a very good fair balance between Ghanaians who live outside Ghana, as well as foreigners who are first-time travelers or business travelers in Ghana that are also part of our crowd. So it's not really because of the 20% of our clientele being foreigners. That's why we are shutting it down. Well, to some extent, yes, we have to be concerned about these things, but that's not the primary case at all.
Well, interesting, but that's also responsible.
Yeah, very responsible
on their part.
Now, while Republic have shut down, the likes of Purple Pub and Apple, they've got no intentions of shutting down. Now, I spoke to the owner of Apple's, and he has been explaining why he won't shut down.
No, it has not, because we knew it before the president announced. So we started.
You knew it would affect business.
We knew, so we started preparing. At least we've already put things in place, like
hand sanitizers, water for your customers to use to wash their hands.
Yeah, we have the sanitizers and then the water, and then the soap, the liquid soap for most of our customers to use.
How about patronage?
It has not affected my patronage because Monday, for instance, after the announcement, Monday was so good. Tuesday was a little bit abnormal, but I hope today it will be nice.
Sounds like people come in large numbers.
Oh, people come. We get our normal size of.
Which, like how many people?
Oh, you cannot tell. I mean, it's normal. It's a bit normal sometimes.
It's interesting how he says Monday was good, and then Tuesday abnormal. Abnormal meaning that it wasn't too good. Yeah. But even though earlier he said everything was fine,
everything was okay.
had not been
affected.
affected.
I guess on Friday I'll do some rovings. I'll go around town and then I'll monitor the patronage over there.
Right, it's interesting. People still want to have fun. I mean, but elsewhere, people are deciding that, I mean, they're staying at home. Yeah, they're staying indoors and not risking anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, away from that, Reverend Danso Abiam of the Abiam Ministries, he's the pastor whose church Kidi recently sang at, or sang his rendition of Don Moen's song, and he has prophesied that Wendy Shea will become a prophetess. Hear him.
All of us, we deserve to know Christ. We deserve to love God. We deserve to come into his pavilion, because he's waiting for us. My prayer is that God will use me to show much love. I didn't take these people to church. Some of them, yes, and I would take them all the time. But they came into my house. I saw Eno crying. Is it Eno?
Yes, Eno.
I saw Eno crying and pouring everything out. What do you call it? Wendy Shea.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see Wendy shaking. I know some people are waiting to see the video, shaking. And Wendy is a prophet.
What are you saying? Wendy Shea?
A day will come that young lady will prophesy. And I tell everybody here, a day will come that young lady will prophesy and preach the good news.
Wendy Shea?
A day is coming.
Hey, then that day, when that day comes, people will go to the church.
I'm telling you, but I don't know about you, but I don't see her, becoming a prophet. I don't know how that would look like.
Well, anything is possible.
Yeah, well, I agree with you.
Yeah, but I'm sure the millions of people who would love to attend her church.
Of course, I agree with you.
Except I'm sure she would have to change
the way she dresses.
Yeah, the way she dresses.
Yeah.
Unless she decides to use that to also draw
attention, or of course, draw people into her church.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be official, Viz.
Prophetess Shea.
Of the Shea Ministries.
Hey! All right, thank you very much, Noella, for bringing us showbiz. Well, a lot has been said about the use of hand sanitizers and washing hands and the running water and all that. But slum dwellers at Abuabo Dagomba line in Kumasi say they can only look up to God for protection from the coronavirus disease. Residents, mostly head porters or scrap dealers, have little or no knowledge of the virus despite being exposed to risk by the nature of their work. Nane Ajuma visited the slum and filed this report.
Liquid soap with water from the spout of a kettle is poured in the palms of these kids. They wash their hands under supervision of their aunt. On the blind side of their mother, the kids left their makeshift house to play with friends outside. Fuseina instructs them to wash their hands to prevent them from contracting the deadly coronavirus.
They just went out, so they need hand washing.
Hand washing has become a formality for many here who have heard about the disease and education materials in the media. In spite of intensified education, most people here are unaware some people have tested positive to the virus in Ghana. It calls for strict adherence to preventive messages from health professionals. Saharatu Zakari is head porter with very little knowledge of the virus.
We don't know. Some diseases, you might shake the person's hand, and I think if you wash it, it will be better.
Do you know how the coronavirus gets into the human body, the passage areas?
Yes, I don't know.
You don't know it can go through your eyes, your nose, and others?
No, please.
Are you aware that you're not supposed to touch your face with your hands, especially when you've not washed it immediately?
No, please. I'm not aware of that.
Scrap dealer Idrisu Mahadu is unaware of confirmation of cases of COVID-19.
We've heard it's in other parts of the world, but not in Ghana. You just informed us.
Idrisu and other colleagues sit under a shed chatting among themselves. Most of them had just returned earlier than usual from daily rounds to scavenge for scrap metals. It is their way of restricting their movement in order to protect themselves. They met on return quite a number of people, though not as many as usual. Discussion centers on the virus and how vulnerable they could be after one of them explained how much they are exposed. Right behind them is a wooden structure. I am told it's a sleeping space for many of them. The structure is poorly lit without windows, so no ventilation. Mats and mattresses are spread on the floor, with other property packed in corners. Mahadi accepts they are largely at risk if the virus should be contracted by one of them.
We can't do much. We have to look to God. We pray it doesn't get here.
The congestion here was worsened by a recent fire that gutted a number of homes here. Now, the few who have been able to rebuild their wooden structures are forced to take in others who are shelterless. At least 8 people now sleep in a room. In this home, rented mainly to headquarters, not less than 100 people live in the 8 rooms. Inside one of the rooms, I find 7 tired-looking women with children who have retired from a day's Kayaye activities, taking a rest. Each has been in contact with several people they have lost track of. Many more are still in the central business districts, going about their businesses. They explain how they have protected themselves in the face of rising cost of hand sanitizers.
We buy sachet water, add soap and wash our hand. They brought hand gels to the market and we also bought them. The sanitizers are expensive, but some of us are making efforts to get them.
A small-sized ceiling fan is the only source of fresh air in the 10 by 12 sized bedroom. The heat here is unbearable. Hanging on the walls are their clothes, as buckets are packed in the corners of the room, freeing the center for their mats. They are aware of the dangers the crowded room exposes them to, especially as they meet hundreds of people on a daily basis in their line of work as headquarters. The inferno on the 14th of February consumed hundreds of wooden homes, commercial washrooms and standpipes. Though some have been reconstructed, the present situation calls for improved conditions. Researcher at the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research, Dr. Michael also explains poor sanitary conditions and congestion may expose the slums to the virus.
But the Ministry of Sanitation and Environment should be able to collaborate with the various regions and the districts to ensure that these slums are managed for us. Because as I said, we haven't gotten to the level of community transmission. These are all imported cases. Once you don't have community transmission, there is a less risk of people exposing. But as soon as we begin to report community cases, then these slums have to be attended to as urgently as possible.
In spite of fear of spread of the virus, the country is yet to experience community transmission of the virus, as all cases recorded are described as imported. Urgent measures will be needed to stem the tide in areas like Dagomba Line. Reporting for Joy News, Nana Ojima, Kumasi.
In here in Accra, the Joy Klingana campaign team on Wednesday toured several institutions in the capital to ascertain the measures these organizations have put in place to prevent spread of the coronavirus. It turned out to be quite a success, as the majority of the institutions had hand sanitizers on offer to their patrons. Nanseme Fajradozi brings you a COVID-19 edition of the campaign.
A week ago, the Accra Metropolitan Assembly distributed some letters to some institutions in the capital. These letters contain guidelines institutions were supposed to adhere to in the time of coronavirus outbreak.
So we are looking out for Veronica bucket, soap, water, and then sanitizers. Since it is a hotel, we expect the fixed sanitizers by the walls. Even if they don't have some by the wall, there should be one right in front of the door before we go inside. We don't have to go inside before we meet sanitizer inside. So
the team made the first stop at the Evita Hotel at North Kaneshi. They had no hand-washing buckets and sanitizers at the entrance.
Sir, this one is not enough. This is just something little under it. All of us, and if we want to use it, it will not even reach us. So please, you will hear from us.
But what sanctions are they likely to face?
Supply the necessary. They've not complied with the non-compliance.
Okay.
So what's going to be happening to them? So we will bring them a summons. Okay. When we close, we'll compile all the lists of all the facilities that have not complied. Then we'll prepare summons for them, per the directive and then per our sanitation bylaws. At times of emergency, everybody must be prepared to go the extra mile for us to protect the public.
We set off to Cove 117 restaurant and lounge at Aveno. The restaurant had hand-washing Veronica buckets filled with water.
Yeah, we are coming from the Public Health Directorates of AMA. We are here on monitoring per the directive that were brought to you. I hope you received your directive. Yes.
They were lauded for the initiative and encouraged to adhere to high hygienic standards.
I have to get about 2 of them also, and the owner wanted us to also put one on the street where the woman is roasting, just to help people be able to wash their hands also.
So we will say you've done a very good job. You are trying to help Mother Ghana control and prevent the COVID-19 outbreak. So you've done very well, and we applaud you for that. You should continue, and also continue to educate people who come to your facility with the preventive measures that are going on.
The team visited the Senate office at Aveno, but there were no sanitizers and hand-washing facilities at the entrance. They rather had hand sanitizers inside.
The person might have contaminated a lot of things before getting here. So we please advise that you place this sanitizer just in front of the door.
They passed the test, and soon we made our way into the Standard Chartered Bank. Officials refused to speak to the AMA health officer, but the work had to be done. Madam Kuchi was in charge.
They haven't provided the hand-washing basin that we have advised that they should provide. They only provided the hand sanitizer. And where the hand sanitizer, there's nobody to direct people to pick the hand sanitizer. When somebody comes, the person will go inside. So I think they have done well for providing the hand sanitizer, but they need to provide the Veronica bucket with running water in front of them. So before the customer even climb on the table, the veranda, the person will wash the hands before the person comes. Though nobody is ready to talk to us, we have seen the efforts they've made.
The team then inspected the New Times Corporation. They had someone stationed at the entrance applying a squirt of sanitizer on the hand of the team. We also found widespread posters of COVID-19 education on notice boards and doors. We met the HR Felix Echampong.
This good information that you've printed here is a very good information. You've done well. And then the sanitizers, but you see, they say we should wash our hands under running water. That is what I was saying. So you need to get your Veronica bucket. It's a complete set: soap, water, and then wipes. So that when you finish washing your hands, you wipe and then drop it in what? A trash bin. Then it will be taken away.
Mr. Echampong was impressed with the campaign and pledged his company will do more.
Of course, we are committed to ensuring the health and safety of our employees and the people we deal with as well. And so we will continue to do more and take the advice as well. We can print more and share it to the community, and even put some in our delivery to our readers as well to also get to appreciate it.
Right opposite Times Corporation is the City Dia supermarket. They also had installed hand sanitizers at the entrance, which was recommendable. But then Madam Florence Kuchi saw something worrisome: flies inside the supermarket.
This is where you display for sale tubers and then fruits and vegetables. But we can see there is flies infestation and nobody is doing anything about it. Please, do you know the effect of flies on food products?
We have some problem with AC, that's why the flies comes inside.
You know that as a supermarket, you need to install fly traps within all the corners of your facility. Are you aware of that? You are not aware.
Nobody told me that about this. No.
Okay. It is mandated in the Offices and Shops Act that in every shop where food product is being displayed for sale, you must have fly traps set all over, installed all over, that will trap flies that finds their way inside the facility to prevent contamination. But here is the case, you don't have any.
But just when we thought that was all, we found a leaking ceiling.
So as a good facility manager, when you saw this problem, and this is a very very busy place for customers that comes in to pick products and go out, you could at least, for the sake of your clients, close down the place and work on the AC to make sure that the place is good for people to come in, because somebody can slip from this place and hurt him or herself.
The items were seized and taken away as it was unwholesome.
Please call your people to send, put them in something and then tie it for us to take it away right now.
The place was also closed down until the mess is fixed. We made our way to the OA terminal at the Seiko station. The manager of the terminal has supplied sanitizers in buses.
Passengers in the floor car, disinfect I have a lot of them here. Me Toby Bray, box of grand is here. You see, I've got say, a lot.
The ticketing office also had hand sanitizers to sanitize the hands of clients and workers there.
Meanwhile, management of Citidia has described the situation as unfortunate. Marketing and communications manager Manchetti K. Afro says they have closed down the Aveno branch of the supermarket until the AMA public health officials are satisfied with the conditions in there.
So in the first place, that's very unfortunate. I understand you went there with the AMA team for a reason, to check our readiness to combat the virus, the coronavirus, which I understand we ticked all the boxes. So we actually even started putting measures in place ahead of we recording our first case, to the extent that the head office, we are even working from home. So people are working from, that's how serious we take it. Even before I continue with the flies issue. So yesterday, one of our early staffs, when we started the business 4 years ago, an expatriate, walking into one of our shops, not the same shop you went to, the security man said, sanitize your hands before you enter. The expatriate lady said, no, I won't do it. She said, okay, you are not entering the shop. She got angry, she took a video. I'm sure it will be trending from tomorrow. That's how serious we are about. We are about when it comes to safety, hygiene, and health of our customers, basically. Yes, so this particular issue, it's very unfortunate. I understand they opened the shop. The central AC was spoiled. They attempted fixing it. The gentleman fixing it had issues, so he had to go back to get some parts to fix. And then it started leaking. So once it was leaking and the place was also very hot because the AC was off, the manager thought it wise to open the doors just to get some fresh air to come in. But unfortunately, if you've noticed this week, we have a lot of flies coming in the system. We are in that season. And so a few flies entered the shop, and that's what you saw. We are not here to defend anything. No, that's very unfortunate. The folks at the safety stakeholders like AMA and food, FDA and the likes will tell you that we've been keeping to the safety standards. And so this is very unfortunate. We closed the shop down immediately to fix the issue. We didn't sell again afterwards. We're not asked to close it down immediately. We're asked to fix it, but we thought it wise to close it down because we care about our customers. So we are opening tomorrow after AMA comes in to clear up.
Ghana Immigration Service has been talking about refusing entry to several passengers who could have posed a risk to Ghana from the novel coronavirus pandemic. The refusals are in line with the travel advisory issued last Sunday, and it affects passengers arriving from countries with 200 or more cases of COVID-19. Now, we have been speaking, or we have made contact with a Ghanaian who recently made his way from the US to Ghana. And he talks about their experience at the airport in the US and how several non-Ghanaians were stopped or prevented by the airline from boarding in compliance with the directive issued by the government of Ghana. And Latif Idris is with this gentleman who is in self-imposed quarantine because he feels that he needs to do that until, or he's doing that in compliance with the directive. He was told to do that at the airport. Latif Idris joins me via live view, and he's going to be speaking with him. So Latif, you tell us what this gentleman has been telling you.
Yeah, Israel, we are coming to you live from somewhere in Accra. We wouldn't want to disclose where we are broadcasting from, because the man who is going to speak to us wants us to keep his identity at the highest of secrecy, if you like. And so we are not going to disclose even where we are broadcasting from and the name or identity of the man we are going to be speaking with. I'm standing outside of the building. You see me standing behind the wall. The man I'm going to be speaking with is on the other side of the wall. And one of the protocols by the UN is that you keep a distance of at least a yard. So the social distance, protocol is being applied here to the latter. He is behind the wall, and even from where I'm standing to the wall is already, respecting the UN or World Health Organization protocol, pardon me. And so we are going to go straight to him. He returned from the US on Monday. We want to find out from you, I will not ask of your name, how easy was it for you to get on board the flights from USA to the Kotoka International Airport? How easy was it?
It wasn't easy one bit. I was due back today, the 17th, after going for a short business trip. And I was on a BA flight, 0068, from the States to London, Heathrow, then to Ghana. Then the American government issued the directive to ban all flights from the UK. So we just got notification that my flight had been cancelled. I tried other airlines on that Sunday, tried getting to Atlanta to get KLM. Just about the time getting up, that flight was cancelled. And then we tried getting to New York to see if we can get Virgin Atlantic to get to London and connect. That one too was cancelled. So it was a very tough one. Then eventually, whilst I was working it up there, my agents too were working it down here. So they got me a Delta flight on that fateful Monday, which was coming direct and was 11:30. So after almost 48 hours of roaming around, I eventually got that ticket at 11th hour.
We will talk about how the struggle started, even at the airport when you finally got, the flight. But Israel, let's put on record that this man who is speaking with us is not carrying the coronavirus. He is not carrying it. He returned and is in self-quarantine. He is in self-quarantine. We have to put that on record. He is not a carrier of the coronavirus. Let's put that on record. So you finally got the flight and got to the airport. Tell us about the struggle at the airport.
Well, I got there. The flight was 11:30 p.m. New York time at JFK Terminal 4. I got there around 6 o'clock. Did early check-in and dropped my bag and waited at the immigration point, checked through, and then went to the gate they gave. But they changed the gate more than 4 times. And we had to move from different gate to different gate to the other gate. Then eventually, around 10:45, they opened the gate for us, I think gate B32. The total passengers on the flight, according to the screen, were like 95. So they called all those that are non-Ghanaians to check their visas and all that. They did all the protocols, and then they allowed us to board according to rows of classes. Then we all boarded the flights. All checks were made, all 95 of us, because with Delta, you see the number of people on the screen. So if you want to upgrade, then you can do an upgrade there and then. So we all boarded a flight. So somewhere around 11 p.m., we're almost all set. And then 11:10, that was when they were told that we're going to go to Accra, 9 hours, blah, blah, blah. The directive and staff will be at London at 1 p.m. So and so. So we're all set, about to leave. Then the pilot comes in again and says that, sorry, there's a new directive and that some changes have come. Then some officials got onto the flight and said that there's a directive from the Ghana government that non-Ghanaians or non-resident permit holders will not be allowed into the country. Initially, we thought it was one of those things. And people were arguing, like, technically we'll be in Ghanaian airspace by 12 p.m. So they should go. And the guys were like, nah. So most of the Americans who felt it was a bit embarrassing got off and then disembarked. But some who were Ghanaians, Americans of Ghanaian descent, felt now we could go and we will find our way in, and it started. So it became a bit chaotic. That was around 12:30, thereabout. Still, some of them were not willing to disembark. Then by 12:45, the pilot said, you know what? If you are not going, then plane is not going. Then shut the plane down. Everybody was disembarked. Our luggage, everything pulled down. Then we came back to the boarding gate. Wow. Now, the new instruction was, if you have a Ghanaian passport or a Ghanaian resident permit holder, you are the only people to be allowed to board. And you know, some of our Ghanaians that are naturalized Americans, as of that time, the American passport didn't have any value.
So the Ghanaian passport was weighing.
Yeah, at that point, you know, some of them have dual citizenship. Some of them had American passport and Ghanaian passport. They had to ditch the American passport and push the Ghanaian passport up. And they had a point too, because they had gone through immigration, checked in, and it's like 2 a.m. And you've checked their visas and given them boarding passes. So they were very agitated and shouted on top of their voices that they will not accept. But the Delta crew will not budge, because they said that the directive was strong at Ghana, and that as a result, they will not let any of them come. So eventually, only the proud Ghanaian passport holders, for the first time, we felt good to be in a Ghanaian. And with the hassle that we've gone through, my fear was, if I were to disembark, I don't know, I didn't know my faith. Yeah. So fortunately, we came back on the flight, and I think out of the 90, barely 40, 50 people were back on board. So people were having 3 seats to themselves, 2 seats. Everybody had at least 3 seats to themselves, all spread in the flight. So that was the point. Then they closed up, and then we took off 3:05 New York time, and then arrived in Ghana 3:03 p.m. GMT on the dot. And we all just went through the process. And I think it was a very, very tough experience. And what I witnessed in the States, with the various states that I went to, the panic and all that is going on, I think we should manage the reportage and the things we say about the coronavirus very well. Else, fear will kill us before the virus even comes.
How is that? The media is there to educate the public, to update the public about where government is, where the state is in terms of this whole fight and campaign. So why do you say that if we are not careful, fear will rather kill us than COVID-19?
Well, if you look at your starting of your reportage, you first said that you're observing the 1 feet rule and all that. The first impression is people might even think that you are speaking to a virus carrier.
So you realize I went back?
Yes, you went back. So that is the thing. We are not hearing people saying that this number of people have recovered. Oh, this number of people have recovered. It's an immune thing, and those that have good immune system can fight it. And we all know that fruits, vitamin C, and immune boosters help. But we are all chasing sanitizers, and some of them even don't have 70% of the alcohol that we talk about. And it's like every day we are pushing out the bad news. These people dead, these people dead, these people dead. And the fear is so much. When I got to the airport and went through immigration, they checked my temperature, and I just walked out. I didn't let my driver pick me, so I took a taxi, a Corolla, Ash taxi, airport taxi at Kotoka International Airport with number G something, I forgot it, but I have it written down. And I told the taxi driver, I'm coming from the States. Do you have your mask, sanitizer, and everything on? He said, no. I had no choice. I boarded it. And then I told him that I'm coming from the States. So if anything, you should know that you've picked somebody like that. He said, okay. And I alighted, came to the house. As soon as my houseboy saw me, he just stood at the gate. He didn't even come close. So I had to take off all my clothes, including you saw my shoes and everything. Since Monday, all my clothes, everything out. My bags were all cleaned, sprayed, and stuff outside. And I walked into the house, empty, straight into a shower, bath with a bucket of Dettol, and decided to stay home for the quarantine period.
A stranger in your own home?
Yes, so I just stay home because we are the only people that can help ourselves. And that's why I'm saying that the talk is too much. The negative vibe is too much. It puts a lot of fear in people. And when I go home, the food that my wife has packed alone in here can feed all of us for like a month, which is not something that I might really need. The distancing and all those things are good. But my plea is, let us push the positive side of the story. The 7 people that have been affected, how is their recovery rate? How is it going up? Instead of this one has gotten one, this one has got, and then the blame game of the government. If a whole Ghana government can stop U.S. citizens from coming in planes will disembark, it tells you that they are doing something. What about us?
How about us? So tell us about back in the U.S., states that are in partial lockdown and those that are in total lockdown. How is life faring like in those states?
I was in Jersey, I was in New York, I was in Philly, and Jersey and New York were very strict. Initially, it was trickling in. All my cousins' kids have all been asked to stay home. But the interesting thing is that they are learning from home because they've all been given laptops and they're going to school online. If you have power bills, like what we call our light bills, gas bills and the rest, all has been deferred for a month. Those that are taking food stamps have been given a month in advance. Those that need to go and register their cars and insurance have all been given at 1 month advance. You can't go to any restaurant after 9, and most restaurants are doing takeout. You can't buy it from there. Most of the Uber drivers now have lost. Most of the trains are empty. People don't get onto trains and buses again because they are staying in. And it's like a full set curfew being put in place. And they have the systems to put in place. So the measures government is taking here is not very different from what they are doing. Theirs are even much more stricter. But my only challenge is that they are good intentions, but do we have the necessary systems to back it? For example, if you say you should wash your hands when you go to the bus terminals, how do we get the water to wash those hands? Do we get sachet waters to do that? And somebody will tell you, I heard on news that a station somewhere in one of those places saying that, well, they have not told us to put buckets and stuff there for us to use. You see, it's not a government that has to do that. We would have to do that. So the directives are okay, but all that we are doing is, you read social media is attack, condemn, and then the fear. I'm not reading so much of positive things. People also, for example, this vitamin C thing, immune boosters, I don't know anybody talking about it.
We are rather talking about sanitizers and other stuff. How do you feel right now?
Well, I feel traumatized. I feel when I got in, the first thing my houseboy did made me realize that there's something amiss. And the fact that when those 7 people that were infected, they couldn't mention their names readily, they couldn't put them out there. I also felt that there will be this stigma. Should I even come out and say, oh, I've been on the flight? How many people was on that flight? Over 50 people. For the past week, how many people have been on flight and come in? How many of them have shown that they are back and they are on self-quarantine?
You have been courageous enough to speak with us. We thank you very much for your time. And you got 3 days into your quarantine?
Yeah, I'm a third day.
Third day into your quarantine in Israel. So this is a man who returned from the United States on Monday. He's been gracious enough to speak with us, comparing life here, how we are handling the whole COVID-19 situation here in Ghana, and how the government of the United States is handling it. 2 different countries with 2 different ways of handling the pandemic, which has killed thousands across the globe and continue to wreak havoc in its trail. Back to you, Israel.
All right, thank you very much, Latif Idris, and very interesting story there. And Latif, I'd advise, the first thing you have to do is to dip the microphone in some alcohol, some spirit, and or you probably just get rid of the microphone. We're taking a break at this point. We're bringing you business news next.
Hello again, let's do more business news. My name is Sandra and I'm still on the coronavirus. Indigenous carrier Africa World Airlines says it is reducing its local flights by 20% and regional flights by 45% following government's travel restriction. The travel restriction, which came into force yesterday, bars the entry of non-Ghanaian citizens from endemic regions from entering into the country. Chief Operations Officer of Africa World Airlines, Sean Mendes, told Joy Business despite the setback, the company is poised to manage its financial shock and will not be laying off staff.
There has been an impact on the number of passengers who are traveling in recent days. The travel advisory that the government of Ghana has put out, which effectively bans non-essential travel to Ghana effective 1300 hours today, is already showing an impact on some of the regional routes. We have trimmed some of our capacity on regional routes by about 45% and on domestic routes by about 20%. But we'd also realize that as an airline operator, we have a responsibility to the communities that we serve to maintain a level of essential service. So we're going to maintain service to all of our destinations for now, and we're continuing to maintain that as long as it is feasible to do so.
Okay. So with this trim that we are seeing, 20% and 45%, that's pretty huge. How is this also impacting your revenues, your financials?
Well, certainly the revenues are taking a hit, but of course when you're not flying these flights as well, there is a savings on the cost side as well. We're fortunate with Africa World Airlines that we're well positioned to be able to ride this out. So at this time, we're not looking at layoffs or anything else. We are confident enough that the measures we are taking, both operationally as well as financially, to conserve our resources and to optimally deploy them for the benefit of our staff, for the benefit of our passengers, for the benefit of the consumers and the traveling public in general, will ensure that when you fly with AWA, you can fly safe and fly confident.
Okay. Now, amidst all these issues, you've seen a number of airlines, for instance, SAS, is laying off about 90% of its staff. It cuts across. Lots of airlines are laying off staff, some are sending them home. Are we seeing a similar thing here?
At this time, Africa World Airlines believes that we are poised properly to be able to ride out this crisis. We have a plan and we're implementing this plan. We don't anticipate at this time to need to go into layoffs or similar, but we are encouraging staff with outstanding leave balances or so forth to claim their leave right now. Non-essential, non-operational staff are already on work from home and have been for a while. We have implemented protocols for our staff in operational roles at the airport, on the aircraft. They are all engaging in mandatory disinfection of hands. They are wearing face masks. They're wearing gloves if they're in customer contact. And all of this is being done for the safety of our staff as well as the safety of our passengers to prevent cross-contamination. If your passport, for example, may have been on a surface that is contaminated, it's essential that when you handle it and our staff handle it, that any contamination is not passed across. And so we're using gloves and sanitizers and things like that to ensure that we're doing everything we can that for those people who have to travel during these times, and there are people who have essential jobs who do need to travel, that they are traveling safely, and they should be confident that when they fly with AWA that they are able to travel safely.
Meanwhile, CEO of the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Daniel Asare, believes a strategic partnership with the private sector in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic is crucial. As Ghana records new confirmed cases of the deadly coronavirus, there are growing concerns of panic buying, and emergency healthcare has put a strain on essential disposable materials such as hand gloves and face masks. Dr. Daniel Asare spoke to Joy Business after East Cantonment Pharmacy donated hand gloves worth 20,000 cedis to the hospital.
Business has been tasked to deepen their corporate social responsibility to Ghana's medical society in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak in the country. With a nationwide shortage of disposable nose masks and hand gloves, CEO of the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Daniel Asare, says there is a need for the private sector to step in to mitigate further the spread of the virus. He spoke to Joy Business after receiving face masks and hand gloves worth 20,000 cedis from pharmaceutical firm East Cantonment Pharmacy.
We are asking not only East Cantonment, I know IPMC also came and gave us 5,000 Ghana cedi. They are corporate Ghana, they are people whose businesses are going to be affected if this thing continues to the end of the year. Some businesses will collapse, but they can come and give us a push to be able to bring down this. If we get one case in our crowded OPD, we are finished. It will scale up and then go to the community. And once we get the virus in the community, fighting them becomes a major listing. So these are some of the initiatives we want corporate Ghana, individuals who have, there are some people who have this and they are holding. You go to them, today it's 15 Ghana cedi. The next time you go there, they say 25 and we want it cash. What are we doing to ourselves?
Head of marketing for East Cantonment Pharmacy, Ebenezer Holmes-Graves, expressed concerns over panic buying of essential products.
It hurts when people approach you and call you because probably you work in the pharmaceutical industry and they're looking for a basic ordinary thing as a hand sanitizer and they don't even get. And when it's even worse when they call you and they've gotten somewhere at exorbitant prices. It's quite disappointing. My appeal to all our brothers and the citizenry of Ghana is that this is a humanitarian issue. It's not everything that we should cash in on.
East Cantonment Pharmacy has also donated items to the Rich and Tema General Hospitals. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical outlet has hinted of plans to begin manufacturing of essential drugs, especially as Iran bans the export of drug ingredients.
And what else can we say about prices of crude oil on the international market? Terrible moment as the commodity is now selling at $25.47 a barrel. Let's go for the commodity news update. That the Multimedia Group is celebrating 25 years of joy. I must say thank you so much for staying with us. And for more news, do log on to our website, myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Sandra Esinam Apen. Thanks so much for watching and stay tuned for the sports news.
Thank you for staying with us here on Joy News with the Prime News. I am Gary Al Smith with the sports. Now, yesterday, the Championship of African Nations was postponed in an announcement made by the host nation, Cameroon, and also the Confederation of African Football due to the coronavirus pandemic. It was due to start on the 4th of April and end on the 25th of the same month. And among other reasons, it's cited by the Confederation of African Football was the fact that many of the populations that were supposed to come for the tournament were enduring the pandemic, and also crucially transport links from across Africa had become a problem, with many airlines cutting down on their route and also not traveling altogether. So we went to Cameroon to get an idea of what the disappointment is like. I spoke to CRTV Sports, that's the state-owned television station, editor of sports, Inje Ino. And at first I asked him about what the general feeling was like when the decision was from CAF and the local organizing committee.
Well, I must say that we're barely 18 days to the Shan, and the general perception here was the country was very ready to host the tournament. You know, most of the football facilities, the stadia, the training pitches were ready already. There was the training of 2,000 volunteers that was expected to begin today, and on all the 4 sites. Unfortunately, that has been postponed with the decision from CAF, but also with the decision from Cameroon's Prime Minister as part of measures to combat the coronavirus that's forbidding the gathering of more than 10 persons. But on a general note, the country looked set. I mean, all the facilities, the hotels were ready. I mean, there were a few issues that could have been raised, talking about maybe the roads, but overall, preparations were well on course for the tournament. I mean, it's most of the football fans, I mean, there is a mix of relief and somewhat disappointment. Many football fans, after the AFCON saga last year with the Africa Cup of Nations, were hoping that the country will host this one. I mean, and there were really high hopes. It's been close to half a century that the country has not hosted such a tournament. I mean, the last competition we hosted was the Women's Africa Cup of Nations. It's 8 teams. It's not the same aura, not the same excitement as compared to 16 teams.
You would also recall that Cameroon was scheduled to host the Africa Cup of Nations, and then it was taken away from them and given to Egypt. So I asked him that with 18 days to this tournament, like he says, were the local population also looking forward to it being called off because of the fears of the coronavirus?
I mean, for a very long time, I mean, for a couple of weeks now, the fans have been asking for the tournament to maybe be postponed or be played behind closed doors. I mean, yesterday I hosted a sports show, which is one of the flagship sports programs on Cameroon's radio, and we had a lot of reactions for the fans. Some of them who were saying, obviously, close the borders, postpone the tournament, or call it off. Others who were saying, do not call off the tournament, but let the games be played behind closed doors. But I mean, if you're playing a tournament behind closed doors, there are just too many loose ends in that. You've got the fan zones, you've got the hotels. You cannot easily control who's coming in or who has what. Remember that even with the fact that Cameroon's airports are endowed with equipment that could detect persons who are infected with the coronavirus, it's got to be persons who are already showing symptoms, who've got high temperatures. But I mean, it's not the moment that you contract the illness that you start showing the symptoms.
So Inje giving us an idea of how Cameroon got and appreciated the news that CAF had postponed the CHAN 2020. I'm Gary Al Smith with the sport. Thank you for your time. We have Fan Zone coming up later tonight.
All right, so on Joy News Interactive, we have just one post that we're going to be sharing with you. It has to do with the hand sanitizers draining very quickly in Parliament House. And the majority leader is concerned about that, and he raised it on the floor. And we have that story posted some 33 minutes ago. 28 comments, 8 shares. And we have Cleto says, allow the poor to enjoy their taxes. Can't you buy your own sanitizers? Even we poor teachers don't have any state machinery supplying with us with it. We demand, Jonathan says, we demand too much from our members of parliament. The majority leader is telling us that the CCTV is not working in parliament. What a country. Angie says, so the CCTVs in parliament are not activated. Yao says, instead of buying sanitizers for schools, you have used part of the $100 million to purchase the sanitizers for parliamentary use only. What kind of carelessness is this? Rich Boy says, Nana governance says, nothing will go for free. Daniel says, so these guys are stealing common hand sanitizer. These are the same people guarding the public purse. And Akwesi, all right, I'll leave out Akwesi's comment. But it's essentially they're concerned that probably people are stealing the hand sanitizers. We haven't yet established that. That's why Parliament wants to look into it. Thank you very much for watching. And that'll be it for the bulletin this evening. My name is Israel Lion. You have a good night.